All right, everybody. Hello and welcome in. It is once again time for everybody's favorite topic of discussion, and that is the Minnesota Vikings as a franchise, Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, and how do these two fit together, and how are they going to mesh and gel and try to field a competitive football team around him going forward. So we haven't talked about this in a while, and I usually try to put it off because it ends up being a controversial topic for whatever reason, but, the reality of the situation is that we are approaching some kind of a point in time where the Vikings are going to have to make a difficult decision, right? Remember that movie Armageddon from decades ago? Ben Affleck, Bruce Willis, meteors headed towards Earth. They go up there with a plan. The plan fails. They could still detonate the nukes, and that's probably not going to work, but maybe they can do something to save humanity. And then there's this scene where an advisor to the president goes off camera, "Mr. President, it's time to make a decision," in a much more solemn voice than I am able to, sort of recreate here in the moment. And it was the weight of that decision that was impactful, because it either meant, everything failed, we gave up, well, let's move on. I don't think it's that dire, but I think that the parallel that the time has come that they have to make a decision has arrived. So what are you going to do with Kirk Cousins? There's three options. They have three options that they can do. None of them are great, but I think that if your goal is to win 7, 8 or more games in the upcoming season, you want to stick with them. So how do you do that? Option number one, I think, is the most obvious. You just let him play out this current contract, and then he walks in free agency next year. You take your 2 void years that you have tacked on in dead cap space, and you deal with it when the time comes. Option number 2 is to trade him, which I think is going to be more difficult to do in the current NFL landscape, because it just strikes me as teams are trying to stay away from high-priced quarterbacks, if you will. The contracts around the league that we're seeing, which is another reason why I wanted to talk about this, because this week we saw Geno Smith, Derek Carr, and Daniel Jones get new contracts. One of them with a new team. Derek Carr has joined the New Orleans Saints, and Geno Smith stays with the Seahawks, and Daniel Jones stays with the Giants. I'm not here to crap all over any of those deals, because I don't want to, in hindsight, a year or two later, look on this video and be like, wow, I was very ignorant to the facts of those teams and their situations, and I was way too harsh on guys like Daniel Jones, because, I get it. Somebody has to play quarterback, and you want to win games. It's the same situation that the Vikings are in currently, because they want to win games, and moving on from Kirk Cousins enters you into an atmosphere of unknown, which I think that they would ultimately like to avoid. They'd rather have a plan B in place for somebody else to take over when they get rid of him. It's like, don't quit your job unless you have another job lined up. You don't want to have this stretch of period where you just don't know what you're doing. So that factors into it as well. The third option is that they give him an extension into the later years of his career. He's going to be 35. We're approaching the age of 35 for Kirk Cousins, so you'd be thinking about maybe 36, 37, possibly even 38, depending on how they want to spread out the money. That's another method to keep him on the team, open up cap space, because that's ultimately what the point of this discussion is. The point of departure for right now, Kirk Cousins and his contract and the salary cap, is that the Vikings are in salary cap hell. We have free agency coming up, and we have a slew of talent on this team that I would think most Vikings fans are going to agree that we want to keep around, and we just don't have the money for it, right? So how do we solve all of these problems? It seems like we have very, very conflicting interests here that are just butting heads at each other with no real solution that makes everybody happy. So you could extend him for a number of years, but I don't think that we want to see Kirk Cousins, 36, 37, 38 years old, eating up 40, 45, $50 million of the salary cap, even though it is going to go up, over the next 3 years. When you are on the precipice of trying to lock in to long-term contracts the young core talent that currently exists on this team. So let's run through the list real quick, shall we? You have Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the league. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I don't care who knows. Justin Jefferson, best wide receiver in the league. He is due for a contract extension, eligible to be done this year. Do we really want to wait around and not get this done until next year? Answer me that. Because take it from a Red Sox fan, right, who just saw Xander Bogaerts walk this past offseason because the Boston Red Sox front office and ownership just decided to fiddle fart around and make a joke of the offerings during spring training, and they let it get to free agency where they couldn't compete. because the Padres and the Mets and all these other teams are willing to spend way, way much more money than John Henry was willing to spend. So Xander Bogaerts walks. A fan favorite is gone. Now we have no idea who's playing shortstop this season because Trevor Story is hurt, and he can't probably throw from that position anyway. It's going to be Alberto Mondesi, of all people. So do you want to end up in that situation where we're like next year sitting on pins and needles with a Justin Jefferson contract extension? I don't think so. Get it done now. Also on this list, Christian Darrisaw next year. He's headed towards elite left tackle status. That's going to be expensive. He's due for a contract extension, eligible next offseason. TJ Hawkinson, I believe, is eligible for an extension this season, and I think we would want to keep him around, right? I think he's much better than Irv Smith, and from the pulses that we took of Vikings Nation, the fan base last year during the season, we were getting kind of tired of Irv Smith dropping passes. So I think TJ Hawkinson is going to be somebody we want to stick around. That's going to be expensive. Do you want to keep Danielle Hunter, 28 years old, plays very well at an elite defensive position? It's going to cost you a lot of money. Had a lot of metrics in the top 10 for PFF grades last year. That's going to be expensive. Also, we need to figure out how to create cap space just to fill the roster. It's not just about keeping that young core talent. It's about just putting a team together to compete now. Because as it stands, we need linebackers. We don't know who the center is currently. Who's going to play center for this team? Or are we bringing back Garrett Bradbury or not? You need some corners because the depth of the corner position is currently not that great. You're really hoping that last year's draft class with Lewis Seen and Andrew Booth Jr. are going to flourish this season, because if they don't, or if they're just mid at best, we've got some problems. So you got to bring some veteran leadership and some veteran talent into the room. Jordan Hicks is definitely going to be on his way out. He's not going to get retained to this team. So that leaves you with Brian Asamoah and not much else at the linebacker position. So that is a long laundry list of problems that we just went over with the Kirk Cousins deal. Number one being, are you interested in winning 7 or more games? Are you interested in maybe winning 7 games and definitely losing a lot? Because with Kirk Cousins, we know history tells us that his floor is 7 or 8 wins. He is disaster proof. You're at least going to be somewhat competitive, if not just mid at best. Then the problem becomes, if you do keep him, what do you do with the contract status? Because you got to be cap compliant in a week, at least, or at the very least in a week. And you need more than to just be cap compliant, because you got to sign free agents. You got to have enough money to sign your draft class that's coming up, even though you only have 5 or 6 picks. So those are a couple of problems. Do you really want to allocate a lot of money to him down the road, 2 or 3 years away, when you're trying to sign your veteran or your young core talent? Do you want to, shoot yourself in the foot in that direction? A lot of questions surrounding this. My ultimate take is that if you're just going to let him play out the current contract and let him walk in free agency, you should trade him to get something for him. That's my opinion. Now, this isn't me hating on him. This isn't me saying he can't win, because, we just had a 13-win season with him in the new offensive system. I think that they'd be inclined to keep him so that he can play in the same system 2 years in a row, which he hasn't done in almost half a decade, I think. This isn't me, being personally biased towards Kirk Cousins. This is just the reality that we face, that we have tough decisions that we have to make coming up. And if we want to win a Super Bowl, I think you got to keep the young core talent. Christian Darrisaw, TJ Hawkinson, Danielle Hunter, Justin Jefferson is the priority target right now. And let the veterans go. If we're going to talk about getting rid of Jordan Hicks, Adam Thielen, Harrison Smith, maybe Kirk Cousins falls into that list, as hard as that decision would be to make. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. What is the path here to keep Kirk Cousins, keep your young core talent, and keep running it back the way that we are? Because I think we've come to a critical point in this franchise where it's probably not viable. It's just probably not, given the circumstances. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. That's going to do it for me. I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.